Okay, why don't we move on to the next session then? We'll be talking about recovery techniques, pre and post game programs. Our first speaker will be Ryan Fair. He'll be talking about what we talk about when we first talk about recovery, lessons for our younger athletes. Ryan is going into his 5th year as a performance coordinator for the Cleveland Indians. He's responsible for the performance training at the Indians Player Development Complex. He's completed a few other stops within pro ball, has over 6 years of high school experience in that setting. He's got a passion for the younger athlete and their overall wellness and performance. So please welcome Ryan Fair.
Thanks, Adam. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and if you could just verify that everything's coming up okay.
It looks good, Ryan.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, first off, really excited to be here, and good morning to everybody. A few months back, Matt had reached out and asked if I'd be willing to speak on the topic of recovery, and so was super excited about the opportunity. And Joe's going to come on after me and knock it out of the park and really blow me out of the water. But we're going to touch on kind of 2 different ends of the spectrum, both in terms of approach to recovery and also a little bit of just demographics of who this message would be conveyed to and who we're approaching recovery with. And so on my end of things, just wanted to discuss specifically what we talk about when we first get new players into the building with us and we approach the topic of recovery. So these are kind of our younger athletes and newer to the organization. First off, just want to start with huge thank yous. First to the Cleveland Indians, the organization for not only allowing me to speak today, but also giving me the last 4 years of some really awesome education, some learning experiences. Over the last 4 years have really learned what it means to be a part of something greater than myself. And I'm really thankful to take a lot of what I've learned here from other staff members, including these 3 gentlemen you see with me in that picture on the bottom right, our staff in AZ, things I've learned from them, and be able to share a little bit of that with you guys today. Thank you to the NSCA, and then of course the PBS CCS. Not to be too hyperbolic here, but when I was 4 years old, I wanted to be a Major League Baseball player. As I worked through adolescence, I quickly learned that was probably not going to be a likelihood for me. But have an opportunity today to work in sports performance, to work in professional baseball, and get to share and listen to some of the greatest minds in the game right now. And everybody who spoke so far has been fantastic. I've taken a ton of notes, and I really appreciate just being a part of that lineup today. Just to expand upon that intro really quick, I appreciate it, Adam. Being a performance coordinator with the Cleveland Indians, one of my main responsibilities is to support our players and our staff based out of our Goodyear Player Development Complex. And so a big piece of that puzzle is to work with our youngest athletes outside of our young J2 signings and those that are at our Dominican Academy. But we typically have 17 to 23-year-olds predominantly in our building. And one of the big components of that is onboarding new athletes into our organization when we draft them. In addition to that experience, Adam touched on just kind of my roots being in high school baseball. So I take a huge passion and interest in working with the younger athlete, educating them and arming these athletes that have a really low training age, but a really high ceiling, and being able to help them develop the tools necessary to be successful professionals and hopefully successful people in life as well. Starting with some of the objectives today, the first thing, just want to define recovery and then put it in context of our younger athletes. Again, I'm going to stay on that spectrum of our new and novice trainees and athletes as they come into the organization, and sort of the messaging to them and what we talk about. And Joe will touch on a little bit more the other end of the spectrum and athletes who have a little bit more experience or a little more established. Want to discuss wellness behaviors and how they strongly impact recovery. So these are some of those big rocks that I know that most of you guys are addressing with your athletes on a daily basis as a part of their response to training and workloads in the game. And then finally, I want everybody to leave this discussion with a problem to solve and encourage you guys to think creatively and how we can maybe build this out together, because this is something that in my current role, and I would say us as an organization, we're still learning to do. We're still learning to how to convey and approach this messaging with our athletes and engage them. And so we'll leave with a problem to kind of think on as we walk away from this presentation. first and foremost, just want to start with what is recovery, and it's a pretty complex topic. You know, are we talking about recovery from games? Are we talking about from a season, from an acute training session, from a set? It's such a large topic. I love this definition that it's broken down in the book, Sport, Recovery, and Performance, and its interdisciplinary insights. Awesome textbook that kind of looks at the entire topic, but really this definition stuck out for me. So it's the reestablishment of personal resources and their full functional capacity. And so what that could mean is on the physiological side, that could be on the physical side, it could be on the mental side as well. We're looking for this holistic recovery process. What does it include? Well, really highlighted a couple points here, but physiological processes could be a part of recovery. So sleep, hydration. We're also looking at motivated behaviors, which I really love that term, being motivated in this process, and having potentially some goal-oriented components. So not just necessarily just throwing this blanket approach to recovery, but actually snipering out what we're looking to accomplish from individual recovery or in response to specific training sessions or the doses that we get in the game. And finally, just looking at it, kind of breaking it down this way, there's passive and active recovery methods is a way that you could look at it. In many instances, there's a lot of indirect recovery benefits. So what we're doing for things that don't really seem like recovery on the outset, they might just seem like daily things that a professional athlete should be doing, but how they enhance recovery and the bounce back from training and competition. Looking at active, just an example, looking at more of us, Jeff touched on, potentially doing something cyclical, non-impact, stimulating the parasympathetic response, and also maybe just trying to get the lymphatic system to move some of those metabolites from damage that's done to the tissues. On the passive side, trying to shoot for basically the same exact thing, but a little bit less of an energy and a workload cost, something that the players can just kind of relax as they're doing it, and also maybe an added benefit of some psychological recovery there as well. And then let's look at a third one as well. And this is a little bit more where we're going to live in this current presentation right now, and that's the proactive approaches to recovery. So right here, you see food and hydration being one piece of it, but realistically, the active and passive measures can all be proactive as well. It's the player being, again, motivated and having some goal orientation around their recovery and using that proactively to try to solve for that recovery piece in their process. So beginning the conversation with a lot of our players that first come into the organization, as you guys all know, every year we draft somewhere between, we could draft and sign 25, 30 plus athletes, some free, non-drafted free agents coming in. In the case of this year, a much smaller number with COVID, impacting our game so much. But either way, bringing them into our facilities, in this case, virtually this year, and trying to onboard them into what it means to be, in our case, a Cleveland Indian and more so a professional baseball player, a professional athlete. So a lot is thrown at them. Everything from just getting them accustomed to our facilities, a new part of the country, a new lifestyle, being away from mom and dad and support systems for the first time, being stressors, but also teaching them about our training philosophy and how they fit within that and how they can make it work for them. The resources that they have at their disposal, whether that's staff or actual physical resources that they can use for their benefit, and introducing them to new people and new players as a part of their performance team. And then, of course, recovery modalities like we're talking about today and recovery strategies. So it's a lot of information that we're throwing at them, a lot of concepts. So really important that we think through a way to have a framework to put all of that information in front of them so that they can engage with it, digest it, and hopefully take something from it and not just drink from the fire hose, so to speak. So a framework conceptually for me that it's kind of resonated with me as I've kind of reflected upon the last 3 or 4 years or going into our 5th year of how we've onboarded players, but also teaching the young athlete, the 14 to 18-year-olds that I've worked with in the past at the high school setting. How have we gone about doing this? When has it been successful, and what things have maybe been a challenge to getting athletes to understand these different concepts, and in this case, from a recovery standpoint? So the first thing, this framework, looking at education, familiarization, experimentation, and then evaluation. The first step is just looking at the educational piece. What concepts are most important to the athlete and most relevant? Everybody on this call is incredibly well educated. You guys are passionate about what you do. That's why you're on this call and participating in this event. And so everybody's striving to learn as much as possible, and then want to get that out to our athletes so that they can use that information. But how do we discern and filter what they actually need to know? And then from that standpoint, can we teach to their appetite? As you know, we're going to have some athletes that, might have gone to school to study some of what we're doing for a profession, and they have a huge appetite for learning about sports science, physiology, and strength and conditioning. But on the other side of it, we have athletes that just want to be pointed in a direction and given a little push, and then provided resources along the way. So how do we meet each of those athletes where they're at in the education process? Familiarization. What resources do we have as an organization that we can provide our athletes? And that doesn't just mean items or modalities. That doesn't mean food necessarily by itself. What it means is, who are the people and what are the things that our athletes have at their disposal to help them develop, and in this case, to recover? And where can they find them, and what can these people do for them? And that's a huge piece of our onboarding process, is just getting new faces in front of our athletes and getting the members of the performance team, as we call it, in front of them so that they can familiarize themselves with who can help them as they learn these new, what these new tools and resources can do for them. There's an experimentation piece. So whether this is guided discovery, where we kind of walk them through what we want them to learn and want them to experience, or if this is just self-discovery, once they've been taught the content and given a little bit of an understanding and some familiarization, we let them get out there. We let them try different things, find what they like, find what they don't like, and ultimately then be able to regroup and evaluate to check for understanding. I like the term check for understanding much better than evaluation, because it's not necessarily a formal process, but it wouldn't fit in with the education, the TION at the end of every word. So our evaluation process is just making sure there's some understanding there, and then ultimately determining what are the next steps. So once you've given them the Recovery 101 discussion and curriculum, and we let them go out and experiment and do some discovery on their own, when we bring them back, we check for that understanding and determine how can we go further, how can we make this work even better for them. So with the lesser trained athlete in the terms of recovery, where do we start? Where do I feel is one of the best ways to start personally? And that's wellness behaviors. So we can teach them modalities, and we do. Here with the Cleveland Indians, we do try to expose them to every different active and passive method that they could use at their disposal to assist with recovery. But we do know that the wellness behaviors are the big ticket items, the highest levers, the lowest hanging fruit, however you want to phrase it, the opportunity for really developing them, not only in their recovery and as an athlete, but also taking that on personally. So as they move through the levels, as they don't have as great a resources when they maybe, get to a full season affiliate for the first time, or maybe we throw in travel, or when they become when they're in their mid-20s and they have some new life demands like a family and children, all of a sudden when they're challenged and stretched personally and professionally, they have these behaviors, these really health and wellness behaviors that they can anchor back to ensure that they're in the best possible position that they can be in that time. It's the most bang for our buck early on, just like a simple approach to training measures in the weight room is usually the best and has the greatest impact on young, novice trainees. Same thing with these wellness behaviors. And just to dial in on nutrition specifically, having been at the high school level a lot, one of the biggest things I've seen is the kids just don't eat enough. So they can want to work as much as possible. They could want to live and die in the weight room. But if they're not fueling themselves, they'll never put on the lean muscle mass, even when their body is producing the hormones necessary to get there or being exposed to the training to do it. So a lot of times that 18-year-old coming in, or even the 21, 22-year-old who's been living the college life on a budget, and they come in for the first time, little changes of just helping them understand how to eat, hydrate, sleep, those things can make a big difference. And there's a lot of large indirect benefits. And that's kind of what we touched on earlier, is they may not even know that they're working on recovery when they handle these. They could think that they're fueling for performance, but the direct impacts on the indirect benefits on recovery are massive. Taking that framework and applying it specifically to one of our wellness behaviors, and that being nutrition, we take a look at kind of starting with the education piece. Here, one of the things that it's really awesome, and what I personally love about my specific role and being with the Cleveland Indians, is we do provide our athletes with a lot of resources, and that includes people. So in my role, I get to take a step back and I don't have to be the expert, and I get to rely on people that are much smarter than me and have a lot more experience than I do to teach concepts like these. So we have an awesome nutrition team. We get these people in front of our athletes, not only for presentations, but for workshops, and teach them the basics of for us, fueling, as we like to put it. Helping our athletes in terms of recovery, understanding that it's not just about energy in, but it's also a building block. So when we do that damage in the weight room, when we work really hard on the field, being able to refuel the body so that it can build, repair, grow, and then be prepared the next day to perform. And baseball being a day in and day out sport, both practice and from a practice and a game standpoint, it really is a necessity. From a familiarization standpoint, what resources do we have on site? Again, connecting them with the people, but also having activities built in so that they can start to see the training table. They can see if we do have any applicable supplements that they do need, but ultimately focusing on whole foods first. And then who are the people that can best help them? So there's a lot of one-on-one sessions that'll occur after that as well with our nutrition team. And then ultimately, what's happening off site? So we're fortunate to have a place on site where the players can live when they're here for performance camps or during the season. But I know a lot of places that's not the case, and especially working outside of professional baseball setting, you know, when your players are at home, what resources are they going to have? And working at the high school setting, I've seen a lot of places where kids don't have a ton of access to food, and so we need to try to find a way to help them do the best that they possibly can. Let them experiment. So whether that means that we have self-created goals for the athletes or have co-created goals with the staff sitting down with them to figure out what those physical goals are and how nutrition applies, it's a great way to draw them into the process. And then maybe have team and group challenges or activities like I said earlier is another great way of just letting them go out into it a little bit. Nutrition's an easy one because every day they're going to eat at our complex several times a day. So it's a great opportunity for them to experiment what works best for them as we try to guide them, use some guided discovery to bring them towards what we would like them to be fueling with. And from an evaluation or check from understanding perspective, food journals, a show and tell, show us your plate, get in a small group setting, or then, you know, of course, the one-on-one type consultations with our nutrition staff are a way to check as well. Hydration, again, looking at the education standpoint, just at least showing them that, hey, this is how it can impact performance outputs. And here's how a dehydration can make you feel as well. It could actually make the work that you're doing feel so much harder than it needs to. How much is enough? That's always one of the big questions that we get early on. So trying to educate them on that. And then if applicable, going down the rabbit hole of alcohol and how that might impact performance and recovery. From a familiarization standpoint, trying to find simple solutions for hydration, not to make this one really, really complex. At the end of the day, if they're carrying a water bottle with them, that's a huge step. With high school athletes in the past, all I ask them to ever do is bring a water bottle. They don't have to buy a fancy one. They could bring a plastic one. But when you actually have a water bottle and you're not relying on water fountains or water coolers on the field, you're going to fill that water bottle when you're going to drink to thirst or drink to what you need. And when it's empty, you have two choices. You can refill it or you can throw it out. And if we're looking for to focus on hydration, we encourage them to keep filling it up. And ultimately, hydration tends to take care of itself. And of course, we just have the players that say, I don't like water, and we need to find solutions there. From an experimentation standpoint, pre and post activity weigh-ins, at this point, unsupervised and unrecorded, just so there's a little bit of comfortability there. They can come in and see the fluid loss that they have on the field. And also maybe cross-referencing on their own, how hard was a session and how hydrated was I for that session? And then ultimately from that check for understanding, having discussions with players, of course, can we have a player get up in front of the group as an activity and teach a lesson on hydration? And then we could also circle back to that pre and post activity weigh-ins, and this time do it supervised and recorded as well. Education on the sleep side, how it impacts performance, how much is enough. I know that I'm running out of time, so I'm going to move a little bit more quickly. Optimal sleep environments like naps, travel solutions. Again, they're not always going to be in the confines of our Arizona complex. One day they're going to have to travel to compete. Sleep logs and trackers, wearables are one way for experimentation. And ultimately being able to pair some of this objective information with subjective thought processes and how they're feeling as a way to connect that and check for understanding. I'm going to, again, get a breeze through. This is the last piece coming up that we're moving towards the challenge that I have for you guys. The question that I want to leave you all with is, how can we best engage our athletes in this process, in this education process, because that's really what it is. And so the book that I really encourage you to read is What School Could Be by Ted Dintersmith. He talks about the peak model, purpose, essential skills and mindsets, agency and knowledge. It's essentially our what, our why, and our how. Our what being, do the students or the athletes develop a real mastery of that topic? Can they apply it? Can they ask great questions? The why behind it is they can believe, they have the belief in what the purpose is behind this. Why is this important? And ultimately, the how can we build those skill sets and give them agency, give them stake, partner with them, and allow them to bring them into the process. In my own words, I sum that up as engagement. And that's one of the biggest processes. We live in a data-driven world, is how do we engage our athletes with that data, and how do we engage them in the process of something that sometimes that they may not feel the benefits of acutely, but as they age down the road, when they go a decade from when they join the organization, they're going to feel the benefits of taking care of those wellness behaviors. And a very brief video that I want to show you, you might have seen this on Twitter, but this would not work in our setting because we want to collect this type of data. But the question is, how are you feeling today when you walk in the room? And this is a PE teacher, I believe at the middle school or high school level. I know videos don't do very well on Zoom, but hopefully you can get the point. Very simple, put the cognitive load on the athlete. When they walk in the door, they have to make a decision, how do I feel today? And imagine all the interventions and discussions that could come from this as a teacher stands at the door and sees their athlete walk in on the red side and start to talk to, hey, why don't you feel good? What can we do about that? And how can we help you recover? So the problem that I want to leave you with as I rush through this, and I apologize for being so long-winded on the front end, but how will you engage your athletes to learn these critical lessons for recovery, for performance, and for life? Wellness behaviors, yes, wrapped up in recovery, but can do so much more for the athlete on the field as well, and then in life. And that's where, you know, as we live in these organizations that are you know, living and breathing this data, and data's coming in and we're trying to make decisions, how can we best engage our athletes with that data, with the process, and so that they can maximize it. Thank you. I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Ryan. Very nice talk. We're going to move on now to our next speaker in the recovery session. It will be Joe Benge. He'll be talking on in-season utilization and thoughts about potential misuse. Joe is going into his 4th year as head athletic trainer of the American League pennant-winning Tampa Bay Rays, and overall 11th with that organization. Prior to joining the Rays, he logged 10 years in the Orioles system. He's been an athletic trainer in the futures game, and he has been minor league athletic trainer of the year in 2015. I could go on and on, but let's just move on to his presentation. Take it away, Joe.
Thanks, Adam. I really appreciate it, and appreciate everybody taking the time to listen here. Go ahead and share the screen here. Let's see. All righty. Can you guys see that there?
Yes, it's on.
All right, good. You know, so just wanted to take the time here, you know, again, thank everybody. This was probably one of the most difficult talks I've done to put together, just because we all know what we're dealing with. We all understand recovery is such a big part of what we do, but it's also such a big buzzword, and it should be. But at the same time, we know that sometimes we're battling an uphill battle for a lot of the things that we heard in the previous talks, like Michael alluded to with the throwing program and what that throwing program was meant to do. And a lot of times we get recovery on the backside in season where guys come to us with these pre-canned ideas and pre-canned thoughts. And that's not going to work over the course of spring training, 162 in the championship season. And we'll get into that. So, you know, a lot of things we look at, chicken versus egg. This is pretty straightforward. This isn't a chicken versus egg situation. We need recovery in order to enhance the ability to perform. The performance isn't always going to be what the players want it to be, but sometimes it has nothing to do with the recovery. But at the same time, we need to help them manage what they're doing for recovery and help them feel good about stepping on the field of performance. We know it's critical for optimal performance, but we also know that what we do is not a once a week or a few days a week sport. This is not the NFL where, yes, they're playing once a week and they get the absolute hell beat out of them. And on Mondays, and we've even seen recently, you know, they're talking about maybe even closing the complexes in a COVID world here for the first few days, aside from medical needs, but they can still manage their workload through the week. it's really hard for us to go to our manager, to go to our general manager, our farm director, and the list goes on and say, hey, why don't we just play this guy once every 3 or 4 days and we'll practice in between? That might be more of a complex type of setup, but that's not the world we're living in as far as in season, what we need to do. So we need to think through, and we need to have the methods, modes to better recover for the more optimal on-field performance. So from a quick review standpoint, we know a lot of what we're trying to do at the cellular level, just dealing with the micro trauma, dealing with the delayed onset, the exercise-induced muscle damage. And down here, I like this. I chose this quote down here because you're looking at muscle damage, hypothermia. You're looking at the dehydration and the glycogen depletion. There's a lot that goes into this. And again, you're looking at suboptimal performance during subsequent training sessions. Well, again, when you look at the articles and look at everything we're going through, we don't get subsequent training sessions. We get games. We get games the next day. And how long is it going to take? Are you sure he's an IL? And yeah, the 10-day IL is made a little bit easier from a feeling good versus the 15 to make maybe more of a quick trigger decision if you think they're going to take that, 5-6 days. But again, we don't get that luxury. So what have we learned in season? And then how do we manage before? How do we manage after? And I know there's many people on here that understand, how do you manage during when the guy comes off the mound and wants to start doing stuff there behind the dugout? So we have our traditional. When I say traditional, there's staples, athletic training, strength and conditioning 101, everything that we've known coming through. You have your ice water submersion, stationary bike for a flush, your massage or stretch. I call those traditional because those were things that to this day persist and will touch. But as we know, now they're being questioned. What do you do for me? What do you do here? Do you still serve the purpose? Well, I need somebody to tell me where ice doesn't exist around our clubhouses, where we don't have plunge pools, where we still have players. They may not call it a flush, but they like to get on the bike and, quote, get their body moving. We all have massage therapists, and we all have stretch. Now, excuse me, I didn't differentiate between dynamic or passive, or static. But still, all those things exist. But how have we augmented them? How have we helped get better in those areas? And even you can see areas in stretch, such as the Normatec, which we'll get into, or foam rolling, that will increase range of motion. It's been studied just by dealing with the stretch receptors and how you break those up just for the pure trigger point. So nothing here has 100% disappeared. We've just learned how to better utilize it. So again, foam rolling. I'll do my best to go through the things we have tremendous knowledge of, because I'm not going to be able to touch on everything here. But from a foam rolling standpoint, we see this. And I think when you look at the title of my talk, which was potential misuse, I see foam rolling, and then you can even go into subcategories such as lacrosse balls, such as I think it was the Tiger Tail had a product that they put out. You have the ones that stick to the wall, and they're all great products. None of this is putting it down. But how many times have you turned around and you've got somebody who's just living on a foam roll with their body weight? Yeah, it's great because you do utilize your own body weight. It's a way to go over the trigger point, the way to go over the adhesions, to get the stretch receptors, the Golgi tendon organs, stretching them, get the physiological benefits of those, tissue quality, blood flow, range of motion, in a lot of ways, relieving discomfort. And some of this is just treating the coconut for the player, which is great. And again, we'll get into that more with the red light therapy. But as we go through this, sometimes we have to educate the player that you might do this before, but you still have to activate before you head out. You say, well, what is before recovery? I think the term recovery can be a catch-all in a lot of ways, because you can see after you can get into almost a self-myofascial release. Sometimes we don't want them necessarily coming off the field, depending on who they are, depending on what their next day role is, depending on where you are in the season, in the playoff hunt, or maybe out of it, and how your manager is managing the team to jump on the table. And all of a sudden you've got Theraguns flying all over the place, or Hypervolts, and your massage therapist. And sometimes it is better to just let them to their own devices with this. But at the same time, at what point do you get diminishing returns? So with foam rolling, it is a tremendous tool that we do utilize. We all do for these reasons. But how do we educate the players? How do we get them to truly understand what they're getting into, and that you don't want to die of the cure because they say, oh, I'm done foam rolling. Now I'm going to go mash with a lacrosse ball for 15, 20 minutes after you just foam rolled the same area for 15, 20 minutes. And then do you start worrying about, did they activate? Where's the joint proprioception? Are they getting into, an agonist antagonist issue where you're long and weak, and everything that goes along with that? Hydrotherapy, we all have, by and large, our plunge pools. everywhere we go, obviously we're mandated whirlpools on the road. And then most of us, if not all of us, now have the underwater treadmill pools or access to it via local clinic, home and road. But as we know, going through, just the core principles and what you're reading under there, again, this is an athletic training 101. And when I say hydrotherapy, now I'm covering both hot, cold, and you can go neutral, such as you'll have players that just like to get into the big tanks with the whirlpool and just take the pressure off, deal with the buoyancy and let that help them. But what we know through the other areas, what we're dealing with, length of application, larger the body area treated. And we'll get into that next because, there's a dirty word, ice, that comes up next. But we want to deal with the increased blood flow, potentially with the warm, the nutrient waste transportation through the body. How do you deal with that through the hydrostatic pressure, the reflexive? And there's a psychological component that goes into this as well. Not, allowing them maybe when that's overkill in our eyes, when we see it, and I'm blanking on it right now, but I forget the name of the breathing technique, and somebody can correct me later, where you'll see guys sometimes spend damn near an hour in the cold tanks between hot and cold, but ending in cold for their breathing. And what that does from what they feel physiologically, but sometimes it's psychological. And allowing them to do those things when there really is no potential downside, as long as you're monitoring what they're doing, if it's breathing, if it's hydrostatic, if it's buoyancy related, is there actually more benefit in that versus just getting back to mashing the muscles, stretching the muscles, and basically taking the body to its limits when they've already done that on the field? So then you get here. This has truly been a roller coaster. You see the cold water immersion, and a lot of that plays into ice. And that we went through that point in time where cold water immersion and ice was really going to be the one method of therapy that would single-handedly ruin the game of baseball. It was the dirtiest word. And none of us are really big ice organizations anymore. We can admit that. I can admit that. We don't do it. We don't ask guys to put ice on, but that does have a time and place. It doesn't matter. You see it across the industry. It doesn't matter what sport you're talking about, the major sports over in Europe. You can watch it. There's ice that pops up, but it's certainly not as prevalent as it once was. But we have the time and place. Obviously, in rehabs, there's a time and place where you want to divorce them from it. You want to educate them. But if you have a healthy player that comes in and wants cold water immersion, wants ice on an area, and we'll touch on full body versus single joint down below, and they feel it helps them, I think my mindset, and I'm always open to input from people, if that 15 minutes of ice doesn't allow them to bounce back or it causes discomfort, you probably have something else you need to uncover. You have probably something else going on in there, because if that 15 minutes or whatever, it could be 10 minutes, obviously we're maxing at 20, but we're going back to, athletic training 101, causes such discomfort down the road that they can't bounce back, then you need to look at what else is going on. And maybe that turned into an accidental diagnostic tool, because they'll get back to core body temperature and they'll keep moving forward. But you can see down below, and I think it's an important point here when you talk about the cold water immersion and the benefits it can pay, especially when you're talking about hands off, again, the term hydrostatic, and just not mashing the muscle, letting everything start the recovery process. Cold water immersion showed limited benefits when induced by a single joint eccentrically biased contraction. So you see it in strength training. We do not obviously want to lose the benefit of strength training, but in season, the weight room and how all the strength coaches do a great job, manage all the different programs, all the different workloads that are thrown at them, which is a hell of a task now anymore in the game. And we went from 25 players and 28 in the taxi squad, and I'm guessing back down to 26, and who knows about a taxi squad. It's a lot of work to do. So they've got to manage that. But then when you get them in the athletic training room, there, you can still reference whole body prolonged endurance or intermittent based exercise. It seems to be more effective. And the studies could go either way as you read them, but we are in fact dealing with whole body prolonged endurance. Not necessarily, for us, a Paul Harker who's dealing with the rehabs, he's not necessarily looking for that because he's dealing with the rehab strength base. When you're dealing with day to day, it comes more into play. So how you educate the players in this. And also, I think we all remember the time when cold water immersion ice was being kicked out the door, but somehow cryo chambers were showing up. So there was still cold around. It just maybe wasn't as sexy as that was, but it still all has a place. Every single one of them has a place in our recovery process. You get into your compression. Obviously, we have Normatec, we have recovery rooms. We have a recovery room, well, we did until it became the Zoom room, but we still travel. And I think this is where the education comes in, be it Garmin's, be it the Normatecs, or any of the other, segmental compression. It's the timing and usage. What is the benefit? After the game, great. There's no downside in that. 6 hours before the game, 7 hours before the game, sitting around the hotel when we were all locked in the hotel this past season, great. You have time to come back. You have time to activate, but you also want to speak to the player. When are you using it? Why are you using it? What are you looking to get out of it? And making sure that this isn't all of a sudden you turn around and you see your shortstop sitting on the table using it for his lower extremities 45 minutes before the game and then running out onto the field, and he's not making that swing either by the athletic trainers, leg length discrepancy, going outside, strength coaches, getting him firing off, making sure that he's in balance, and he hasn't increased, because the studies are showing you can get increased through the Normatex. And I'm not picking on that. I'm just using that because that's just a product that we all know. They all do. But it's not a new, obviously not a new concept. This has been going around forever from a health standpoint and moving the swelling. But, how are we educating them? How are they using it? And are they putting themselves in the line of fire before game activity? You can see it with the compression garments. Some of the theory behind that is, does it basically diminish the amount of space that the fluid is allowed to collect while during activity, so it keeps it flowing, keeps it moving again? And you could, in a poor man's term, use that as hydrostatic, keeps it pushing. So using the lower body, is it pushing it more towards the upper body, more towards circulation, lymphatics, and keeping everything moving? There have been studies to support it, and there's no downside to it. Again, for this is just the benefit, the timing, and the usage, and making sure that players know why they're doing and what they're doing with it. You get into your lasers here in the Class 4. We all have these, and they're not new when you look at the studies, but they are new when you talk about the fact that they were FDA approved in 2003. Looking at the photobiomodulation, but you're looking at the difference Class 3 to Class 4, cold to hot, and what you're trying to get out of it, basically how it is penetrating deeper, how it is more efficient passing the energy through to the nerves, the muscles, the ligament, the tendon tissue, and something that I'm a big fan of when it comes, and we use it before for obvious reasons, but when you talk about recovery, could it be used in a post sense? Could it be used to start the cascade effect when you talk about the nitric oxide, not nitrous oxide, that's a whole nother form of recovery, but nitric oxide and the cascade effect and how you're starting the healing? Is that a way to actually manipulate the tissue, getting them ready, for what they've just done on the field when you don't want them mashing, when you don't want them stretching, when you don't want them, or they don't even want to go out and get a flush? Is that part of what you can do in a recovery process? You can, but obviously we know we use this early on, what we're trying to do with it, how we're trying to get them going, and, with the light energy absorbed. And, there's a picture coming next on the red light therapy, which, it kind of sums up where we are. But with the blister and wound care management, you can see down below, which we know there's effect to what was started years ago when I first got in the game in 2001, and I talked, with Hark and Vinny about this, and Mike Sandoval, and going back to my time with Richie Bryan and Dave Walker, where we had the light pads and guys would lay on them. And that was at the time revolutionary. Well, it feels like it's coming back again. Going through with the red light therapy here, we know it's just, it doesn't have the per se power, but the at-home use devices are becoming more and more. I think it's important that we get ready for that. As you'll see coming up here, get your red light therapy. Here's a real picture. Face change to protect the innocent. But this is real. This was in the middle of the World Series, and this guy traveled with it all year. Frequent visitor to the athletic training room, but this is something that we're all dealing with and all here to work with. What you'll see here real quick on a soft tissue, two guys that I appreciate. This is Shin over here in the lab coat, and that's Hamari on the right. Shin is our acupuncturist. He's also an athletic trainer. Hamari is from Japan, could not practice acupuncture for licensing reasons, but they have both taught me an absolute ton about soft tissue, a ton about recovery and utilization. So you have your scraping. We're all, fans of that. And we have to educate again before versus after, and what we're doing with it, and how you're utilizing it for a starter who has 2 to 3 days to recover, a reliever who has to bounce back the next day, and then the order in which you're doing scraping, cupping, and trigger point. Obviously, the petechia, the light bruising, you see it over here, but you want to follow, you don't want to live local. You want to live global. So you want to follow it up the chain. Just because you want to live here on the medial elbow, you don't want to say, okay, that's it, I didn't find anything, we're good to go. So after your superficial release, what comes next? Here you go. Here you went up the chain. Great. What comes next? For us, you're going to go trigger points. You want to recover. Why do you want to go trigger point when you're going deep and they're in between? For this very reason, right? For the very reason that you want to be able to palpate. You want to be able to palpate the hyper-irritable spots. Whatever finger you use. I got small hands. I use my thumb. Some people end up using index, middle. Depends on what you have the most feel with. But you don't want to get to where you're cupping next and you've puffed up the tissue or you've raised it because you want to separate. And now what you're doing is taking an area of discomfort and you're trying to push down. So you want to think about the order in which you're recovering. Educate them. If they want to do multiple days, multiple modalities in one day with utilizing, manual, explain why you're doing these things in this order. You have your hyperirritable spots, palpable nodules, and you want to, once the trigger point's released, you do want to move the joint. So for example, after you hold the position, release, go back with a little less pressure, move the joint, bicep extension, pronation, active action of the muscle, and make sure that you're working through the range of motion. Cupping, here it is. Why cupping after trigger point? It'll raise the skin, difficulty in feeling trigger point tightness, cause tightness or soreness, and you don't want to just press. You just have to think everybody has their own pain threshold. Just because one of your athletes has a 4 on a scale of 10 pain threshold doesn't mean the next one won't have an 8. So we want to make sure we're taking care. So those are the 3 orders in which we do them. And again, a lot of the education has come from just being in the game, listening, and utilizing people on your staff, such as Ray Allen, our massage therapist, Shin, and Hamari. Here's depth of treatments. I thought this was a great image, just showing what you're trying to get with each, but why you would start here, then bounce to here, and then go here. Because if you go here, getting here could be a real bear. Nutrition, again, we have a tremendous staff of dietitians led by Ryan Harmon, and this is from her. I picked her brain. And quickly, this could be a whole topic into itself. Replenish, repair, reinforce, rehydrate. This is the staples that she goes after and sits down with all of our athletes. They're all documented and they all speak, educated on supplements, why they're doing what they want to accomplish. And sometimes you lose the battle, and as long as they're not doing, harm to themselves, but more times than not, she's going to educate them on what they need to do, no matter what the plan may have been in the off season, what they were told. And here you go. You have to remind them they're not chess pieces. They're real people. They're real athletes, and that their bodies need to recover, but they also need to approach the recovery in a mature term. We get these plans sometimes from the off season, people who aren't with us for 162 games and don't understand what we're going into. And we just know they don't make sense. But when you get everybody together, you work as a team, be it mental skills, be it athletic training, strength and conditioning, nutrition, and your field staff, and we have tremendous sports science with Joe Myers and his team. Everything can work together, but you have to be willing to educate the player and be willing to lose some battles and pick the ones you really do want to fight. One size never fits all. The recovery methods and strategies need to be person to person. It's not going to be the same. You can't get one piece of paper. You can't walk in with one piece of paper and say this works for everybody. And that was addressed earlier, and I thought that was a tremendous point. Nobody can predict usage, stress level, injuries that are going to occur around them. Are they going to play more? Are they going to play less? Role changes, position changes. And let me tell you what, these right here, successes, failures, and home stressors, those play into recovery so much more than people appreciate. Sometimes they don't understand that that's what carries in, and that's what we're dealing with in the athletic training room. It's a group effort. This team right here is tremendous from strength and conditioning, soft tissue, and everything. Can't thank them enough. 2020 was a bear. Hopefully 21 will be a little bit better. We're going to stay optimistic. Just want to thank Matt Krause and the strength coaches for really giving me the opportunity. PBATS for everything they've done for me throughout my career, and the Tampa Bay Rays. And I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate the talk, and very well done. We're going to move on to our panel now, panel discussion on recovery. We've got a couple joining us. One is Michelle Riccardi. She is in her 5th season working with the Diamondback Sports Medicine and Performance team. She overseeing individual athlete assessments, education, supplementation, nutrition. She has 23 years of experience in the areas of sports nutrition, clinical nutrition, exercise physiology, research, and academia. Prior to working with the Diamondbacks, Michelle worked with Exos, the Cleveland Clinic, the Cleveland Browns, and Cleveland Cavaliers, and a host of others. So we're pleased to have her on this panel today. And then also joining us is Josh Seligman. He just completed his 18th year in professional baseball, including the last 10 as the Brewers' head strength and conditioning coach. Prior to that, Josh was a minor league strength conditioning coordinator for the Marlins, and also was an athletic trainer and strength coach in the Marlins minor league system. He holds a BA in exercise science and dual master's degrees in kinesiology and sports nutrition. So thank you, Josh, for also being with us today. I'll get this started. Hopefully some questions are going to pop in here, but I'll get it started with Michelle. If I can address a question to you. there's a lot of different diets for our athletes going around. We hear from our athletes themselves talking about it. I know there was a documentary last year, maybe it was last year, that came out about plant-based diets for athletes, and we hear about paleo and keto. So when you talk about specifically on recovery, how does that affect these different, strategies for the athletes and their ability to recover and perform?
It is an important question, Adam, because you have to think about where are the athletes getting their information from? Is it Instagram? Is it from a documentary? Have they had any prior nutrition education or a real nutrition assessment before? Because if not, that just might be setting them up for failure. Perhaps they want that quick fix. So maybe they're trying to do keto during the week. They found it too hard, so that they're eating whatever they want over the weekend. Now they're up 7 pounds, a fall 7 pounds. And then maybe now they're trying to intermittent fast and try to do fasted cardio. That's just long-term going to set them up for failure. So being able to get them down for a one-on-one assessment to understand their nutrition beliefs or prior nutrition education, as well as getting a good medical history, and find out what their true goals are and pair their goals to performance. And it ties into what DK noted yesterday. We don't have to sell them anything. They want to play. They're going to want to recover. So if someone's in a situation where they're going into a surgery, we can work together with our sports team members, let's say our rehab team. Can we work in a nutrition intervention here that starts tying in their understanding of nutrition with enhanced recovery? So maybe we're going to work on a protocol that has, HMB worked in pre to post treatment where we have that muscle stimulus. And now that they're only working with the dietitian, but now the rehab team that ties them in with the athlete's goal. They want to recover. They want to minimize muscle tissue breakdown. They want to return to play. So I also like to make the nutrition component, fun, depending on whether we're working with the younger athletes or the older athletes. And again, a lot ties into attention and focus. They can really learn one thing at a time. So making it fun, see if they can master that one thing, and that builds their confidence to then tie in new nutrition habits that will help support performance. So if an athlete loves, watermelon, for example, he crushes watermelon, he crushes pineapple. Okay, well, cool, watermelon's got citrulline in it. This can help with blood flow. This might help decrease muscle soreness. I can have this? Yeah, you can have that. Like pineapple, it's got papain in it. That can maybe help with decreasing muscle soreness too. So trying to make it fun, and that supports not only what they're eating inside the facility, it maybe helps support what they're eating and choosing outside of the facility as well.
Great, thank you for that. I'll address Josh next. Can I ask you about? I know in our organization when we talk about recovery in the weight room, there's obviously periods of deloading, and we've got something called kind of CNS lifts and stuff like that. Is there, how do you make the decision, or what kind of information do you evaluate to know, when does a guy need to go beyond a normal lift or go below a normal lift for that day and within the sequence of the season? What sort of information do you evaluate to figure out, how to make those judgments?
Yeah, I think, there's obviously a ton of variables that go into things like that. We've all heard the thermostat versus thermometer kind of analogy. We try our best to anticipate, what's going on. I think having a good feel for what the schedule is like can help guide you quite a bit throughout the season. Are you playing a getaway day in Atlanta where it's super humid and you just came from, a not so humid place? So now you're pushing the hydration on the athletes and just trying to stay ahead of things. And then is that compounded? Are you going to Chicago where, there's other distractions that these guys are going to be confronted with? So having that good feel for what the schedule is looking like and how your team's been doing. Sometimes those guys, their time of possession, they may be playing defense for more than half of the game. So you can make your adjustments based on how the games are going. Sometimes you just get in a bad rut and guys are feeling just naturally beat up, so you make your adjustments that way? Or is your starter who pitched tonight and then you go into a day game, how do you make the adjustment for that guy? How loose is your team with that? Can you encourage him to sleep in, and then maybe he gets his stuff done during the game so he can focus on the sleep recovery? So I think just having a good feel for what the schedule is like the day to day kind of helps guide us as far as our interventions with the athletes.
Thank you. Yeah, very good. How about for Joe? You've been in the game now for some time, and where do you see, in the last 5 to 10 years, what's changed as far as the mindset of recovery with your athletes? What sort of differences have you seen, and what have you found that has worked the best versus what were the older standards to get guys prepared?
I think one of the biggest things that's changed for me is the education of the player. And sometimes they can be, as we know, too smart for their own good because they're consistently reading, they're consistently thirsting for information, how they can prolong their career, how they can avoid injuries. And I think that's one of the biggest things. But I think it also has challenged us as an industry, challenged us to better work with sports science, with nutrition, with strength and conditioning. And we've all had to come together because so much of their education deals in so many different areas. So it's not just like when we first came into the game and, I think back, which is crazy to think now going into my 21st season, what did you deal with? It was so much ice. It was ultrasound. And when all was at a fail, just use some Advil and maybe just dig in with some massage. And a lot of times that worked. There was something to it. There is something to still old school in keeping it where it was. But I think today with the better education player, the education that we have, research, and, every organization, we all have people that are there to help us now to really make sure that we're up on the research and everything. And I think that's what's changed. It's not that, so much of what's old is new again. The old picture, I think it was the Cardinals who were doing planking back in the day. The picture I'm probably talking about when they were on the field. And I don't know if that was St. Pete or wherever spring training was. And, Trung, which by the way, congratulations to Trung, Cal, 2020 Major League Strength Coach of the Year. He has some old pictures of Babe Ruth, dealing with basically range of motion and med balls with Joe DiMaggio and all these things that we see as a cool. I have, a lot of our power guys will go into the weight room after they come off the mound and work on their rotational strength, and they use that as a recovery. So I think having to be open-minded to what I would have said back 21 years ago, which is, what are you doing? Versus, okay, I understand what you're trying to do, but now educate them on maybe, okay, you're not in the minor leagues anymore. And I think that's so important that I've had to learn. And I was mentored by so many head athletic trainers, that are on this call, from, a Jamie Reed, a Brian Ebel, and Dave Walker, coordinator, and dealing with a Roger in Milwaukee, and everybody who's, just kind of helped me understand how things work at the major league level. But you don't get that because at the minor league level, everything is so controlled. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we probably have to deal with as an industry, and all the information gatherers in sports science, and everybody probably sees it. And Mike Reinold seeing it, I think probably from a different angle now, more than he did when he was in Boston, is that work disparity sometimes from minor leagues to big leagues. And that chronic workload ratio where they're really controlled here. And you get here, development's over. So how do you handle those spikes? And then how do you handle those recovery? And that's where the methods and modes come in of now having the Normatec at our disposal, having Shockwave at our disposal, having Shin and his acupuncture, or, we can't do dry needling in Florida under licensure. So utilizing those methods and really dispatching them and seeing benefits. I think that's the biggest thing, is not turning my nose up and accepting what the players want to do, but also be willing to educate them on maybe what they're doing too much.
Great. Thank you very much. I think we have time for one more quick question. I'll say to Ryan, with the younger athletes, they generally feel bulletproof. And so you're talking about, they're bringing in routines that maybe they developed during high school with their dad or a coach there. And then you're asking them to do kind of more of your organizational norms. What works best to kind of get them to buy into the new, things that you're trying to get them to do that's changing their routines?
Yeah, that's an awesome question, and probably an ever evolving one that we're looking to answer as we bring in new athletes. And And as has been touched on before, the information that's available to our athletes today is so much different than even when, you know, I'm relatively younger when I was playing. And so being able to, I think, even as, you know, Joe just touched on, is having an open mind and being willing to have the conversation first. A word that our players will hear, you know, pretty relentlessly when they first join our organization is partnership. We're looking as staff and resources to partner with them as we bring them into being a Cleveland Indian. And so a lot of times that partnership is being able to feed them information, and they're a blank canvas, and we can kind of guide them in the direction we want them to go. And then other times they have a strong support system at home, whether it's a productive support system or resources or not. They have a strong one, and they have people that are a presence in their lives. I have been on the phone with a parent's dad before to be able to give assurance to the father so that he can echo just positive messages to the player, because that player had, you know, really never left the care of his parents before. But even when it comes to you know, private sector, you know, training and things of that nature, is being open-minded, being able to look at the programming together, walk through where there's similarities, dissimilarities. And then I do think it takes a really subtle approach over time to be able to almost bring them from right here, if they are really far from where you want them to be, know where you want them, and slowly craft them maybe over the years to that. And that's something that we found with even introducing new technology and ideas just to players that have been in the organization for a long time that are bought in, is being able to, hey, this is something new. It's uncomfortable. You're not used to it. You may not be bought in. We're going to spend a couple years getting you to where we want you. And I think that's kind of a productive mindset.
Great. Thank you very much. Matt, do you want to take back over?
Yeah, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and we'll be back right at, I guess I'm doing the time here, 11:30. So take a few minutes, grab a drink, whatever you need to do. We'll be right back.